So after our reviews of various e-bikes, Fuel, Mockwheel, Fido and Velowave, and obviously our coverage of the Penguin Pickups cargo bikes, I think it's pretty obvious that at this channel we're about all forms of electrified transportation. And e-bikes? They're a great solution for people who either don't want or don't need an electric car, but do need some form of personal transportation to get them where they're going. And since we're always inundated with questions about how to pick a good e-bike, we thought it was time to make a video on what you should look out for and what you should avoid when buying an e-bike. So, let's dive in. Okay, let's start right at the start. And before we get into e-bike things, the first thing you'll need to think about are just general bike things. So what should you think about when you're choosing any bike? Well, first thing is, what are you planning to do with it? Back when I were a tiny wee lad, the only kind of bicycle there was the safety bicycle. Well, I suppose you could still get a penny farthing. And then we sprouted roadsters, cruisers and the flying pigeon. Then along came BMX and mountain bikes. And then, well, now there's just all sorts of different types. From traditional mountain bikes and road bikes to hybrids to fat tire bikes to cargo bikes. There's an enormous range of bikes to meet basically every need. So you want to look at what your use case is, what you want to use it for, when and where, and pick a bike that's gonna meet your needs. Then the next step is picking a bike that is the right size for you. And this is one of those things where, to be blunt, buying online is more likely to suck. It's one of those things where going to your local bike shop, or if you're interested in a specific brand, the nearest dealer that sells that bike is going to pay dividends in the long run. That's because a bike that's the right size is going to be more comfortable and safer to ride. A bike whose geometry fits your arm and leg length is going to be one you're more likely to use. You're going to feel more confident riding a properly sized bike, and because bodies are all very different, it's really difficult to find a bike online that meets your needs if you haven't already been fitted for a bike. So going out and testing them, it's a really good idea. And look, let's take a moment to talk about the fact that everyone who does not have a condition that precludes riding a bike should be able to find a bike, a trike or a hand cycle that fits. Despite the impossible images that are projected at us daily, photoshopped and AI'd into unrealism, we are all imperfectly beautiful, to steal a really good line, and finding a bike that fits is a super personal thing. It means finding a saddle that's comfortable. One of the review bikes that we have has a saddle that is, frankly, way too narrow for my arse. That means a seat tube and a head tube that are the right length and have the right relationship to each other. That may mean pedals or handlebars that work well with prostheses. And because everybody's body is built to be strong in their own way, there isn't just one athletic body type that's the only one that should be riding a bike. So having a range of different sizes and styles is vital to meeting everyone's needs. And for you, that may mean trying a bunch of different bikes to find the one that fits your imperfectly beautiful body. But if no one around you sells the bike you want, then you can measure at home and get a fairly good idea of a bike that'll fit you. The seat tube height is typically the thing you're going to need to make sure is right first of all. That's because if the seat tube is too short, then most likely the head tube will also be too short, and the frame in general will be too small. Then you're stuck with a handlebar that's way too low, and you're stretching your back and your neck trying to fit yourself on a bike that's the wrong size. There are a bunch of different calculators and tables online, but each manufacturer is a little bit different, so you'll want to check the manufacturer's site to make sure that the recommendation that they make matches up with what you're expecting. If in doubt, go with the manufacturer recommendation, obviously, rather than generic internet advice. Typically, manufacturers will either have specific charts for individual bikes or for a particular range, so make sure that if you can't test ride before ordering the bike you want, you check that out before you order. Oh, and be aware that you might want to size up or down the bike based on whether you're a more upright riding position type rider, if you're more concerned with lightness than size, if you're a mountain biker and you want finer control, or if you, like me and the flying spaghetti monster, have long, noodly appendages. Okay, so you know what kind of bike you're looking for, and you know the size. How do you choose between the many manufacturers out there? As I already said, if you're shopping in person for a bike, the next bit is going to be a lot easier because you can physically inspect a thing you're looking at buying. Online, you have to rely on reviews, and I don't think I need to say this, but beware of reviews written on sites like Amazon and the like, because these days they're often written by bots. And while it's been fascinating to see the progress being made in the world of humanoid robotics, I can't think of a single robot that can ride a bicycle to the same level of skill as most 10-year-olds in suburbia, let alone a courier cyclist or indeed Danny McCaskill. So reviews by bots should definitely be taken with a Kawara salt mine sized pinch of salt. When I'm looking at a bike, the first thing I look at is build quality. How are the components put together? Look at the standard of the welds. Does it look like a pigeon had an unfortunate bathroom incident? By which I mean there's lots of splatter, signs of poor weld penetration, little bits of welding wire stuck in the weld, that kind of thing. Or do the welds look nice and neat and clean? Did they properly clean up any areas where machining's been required? Or is there swarf? That's that tiny little bits of metal lying around. If swarf's around, that means it's more likely that swarf has got into areas where it shouldn't, where surfaces rub together, and little tiny sharp bits of metal will cause that wear to happen more quickly, potentially causing premature part failure. Take a look at the way cables and brake lines are routed. Do they rub anywhere? Are they too tight at full expansion of the suspension, if the bike has suspension, or at full compression, would they foul the wheel? Yeah, that has actually been a concern on a review bike that we had. Do the latching mechanisms work well? Are the components from reputable suppliers, or are they all made by no-name fly-by-night companies? And I do mean look carefully. Is that hub made by Shimano, or is it made by a seemingly unrelated brand called Shimano that nobody has actually heard of? It's sadly more common than we'd like for knockoff brands to choose similar enough names to try and confuse novice buyers. The next thing to look at is how the controls are configured. Just as we've seen with automobiles, we're in a bit of a state of flux as to how controls for vehicles are laid out with bicycles too. So have a look at where the controls are and how they function. Many e-bikes have a "I just want you to take me places" go lever, or sometimes even a twist throttle, so identifying how that operates matters depending on how you're planning to ride the bike. Also, be aware that if you're importing a bike that's sold online, it might have its brake levers swapped from your country's norm. European and US bikes generally have the rear brake lever on the right and the front brake lever on the left. Bikes sold for right-hand drive markets like Britain, Australia, Aotearoa have the rear brake lever on the left and the front brake lever on the right. If you're used to riding one and then switch to the other, it can be easy in an emergency to grab a handful of the wrong brake and end up flying over the handlebars. I'm going to hazard a guess that a lot of, shall we say, the smaller online bike sellers tailor their bikes to the largest markets they sell in, and if you live in a right-hand drive market, you either have to be prepared to have your brakes swapped or swap them over yourself. Oh, and while I'm at it, in some markets, throttle controls for motors are illegal and e-bikes are only allowed to provide assistance if you're pedaling. If your e-bike has a throttle where it's not allowed, you'll get yourself in trouble if you happen to ride past the wrong kind of government employee at the wrong time. Then I tend to look at reviews, and this is something that's become much harder to do because of the proliferation of paid and bot reviews. As many of our long-time viewers know, we neither take sponsored products nor do we participate in affiliate marketing, which is why you don't get a nice discount when you click through from our reviews to the products, unlike some other sources out there. Support the channel so we can keep doing that. We do obviously accept things for review, like bikes, but are very clear that we do not cede editorial control, which is why, unlike a lot of other channels out there, we have said we don't recommend this product. And this is okay, but it is very compromised. So look for reviews. You should expect to see a mixture of the positive and the negative when you're looking at reviews. If all you're seeing is positivity, be very suspicious. And yeah, the reviews on manufacturer sites and on Jeff Bezos's baby tend to be unduly positive and aren't really worth the pneumatic phase crystals that are being twisted to display them. You can always find real-world experiences around the internet. Lemmy or Reddit are solid places to look. And while you're there, why not take a look to see whether there are comments about after-sales support? How bike companies treat their customers after the initial sale varies dramatically, and finding stories from people who've had problems and how they got fixed, or indeed if they got fixed, can give you a really good idea whether buying a bike from a particular manufacturer is a great idea or an idea that you'll come to regret. There are plenty of horror stories out there about some bike manufacturers failing to support customers after things go wrong, or even things arriving broken out of the box and companies being unable to supply the parts to fix the bike, leaving the customer out of pocket and with a broken bike, which, because they have no local dealer, can't easily be fixed. Because, and this is important to know, many local bike shops don't deal with repairs to e-bikes unless they're e-bikes from a company with which they already have a relationship. Partly, that's down to knowledge, training and the need for specialist tools. Most bike shops probably don't have the expertise, let alone an oscilloscope and a rework station on hand, and that's something you might well need to fix a recalcitrant e-bike. Some of that is down to not having the service information, which may be difficult or even impossible to come by for some companies who use components from smaller suppliers than, say, Bosch for motors. Some of that is down to desire. Why get involved in that complexity? And some of it is down to the fact that, as we've said, after-sales support can be sketchy for some off-brand bikes, and having faulty customer bikes lying around and waiting for parts from a company where spares are persistently out of stock is, well, expensive and frustrating for the shops in question. Which is why I recommend perusing the spares section of your bike manufacturer's website and seeing what's in stock. Of course, the concerning sign is if they don't offer any spares at all. And if the only way to get spares is to talk to a support person, that's a bit of a red flag. Of course, if you can find an e-bike manufacturer who's supportive of right to repair, that would be ideal. But as a whole, the e-bike industry has loudly and vociferously fought against right to repair, which is horribly disappointing. As I mentioned in my mock wheel review, my other bike is nearly a century old, and one of the delightful things about it is that pretty much any bike shop can repair it, although they do whimper slightly when they see it's got rod brakes and Westrick rims. We need to reach that kind of point with e-bikes where parts are broadly standardized and readily obtainable. I'm going to say it again. Talk to your legislators. Okay, so one other thing that's really important to touch on is CE or UL marking for batteries. The CE mark isn't a testing mark, it simply means the product meets minimum safety standards for the European Union. Similarly, UL listing means the product being sold meets the minimum safety standards for e-bike batteries. I'd strongly recommend getting a bike with a battery that meets those standards, because there have certainly been some iffy companies who sold items with some standard battery packs which could be unsafe. Given that many people charge their e-bike batteries in their homes, having a poorly made lithium-ion battery that might go bang in the house is generally a bad idea. Not only that, but in some jurisdictions it's now illegal to sell bikes that don't have a UL or CE rating, And in some multi-family dwellings, apartment blocks and the like, they're reluctant to allow people to charge non-safety marked e-bikes because of the presumed fire risk. And finally, remember when you're buying your e-bike to pick up those nice accessory packs that are very often discounted at the point of purchase, alongside your bike helmet. Because you do wear a bike helmet, don't you? So are there any things you'd recommend that we missed? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for joining me today. And if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them below in our Discord chat room, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of the more than 1,500 people who help fund this channel through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and making sure that we can be 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. There's a range of different tiers you can sign up for, from as little as $1 a month. Or if you pay yearly, just under $11 a year. A huge welcome to our newest supporters: Carol Bullower, Rodolfo, Michael Owen, Winter, and Wilton Live. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your week of fame. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at. Address is also down below. And if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store in the down below too. This month we're celebrating spring with an amazing t-shirt design by our in-house artist and animator Erin. Get yours today by heading to our Redbubble store. We've got some great content coming up, so make sure you've subscribed on PeerTube or YouTube, and we'll see you soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we think this one is also well worth a look. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving!